Pues bienvenidos a la cuarta
So
versión del
welcome all to the fourth conference of the mathematical brain for our school, Colegio Hacienda Los Alcaparros. It is very exciting. So welcome to the mathematical brain. This is part of an initiative, Brain and Initiatives, that since 2017 has been celebrated yearly. In just a few minutes, we will start the last conference of the mathematical brain, which will culminate the fourth version of this colloquium, Brain and Learnings. Before starting, we would like to recommend you following these steps on our screen to guarantee the best experience of this webinar. To use the interpreting module, please seek in the lower Zoom bar the globe icon and
Recording
select
in progress.
the language in which you prefer to listen to the interpreting. If you don't want to use the interpreting module, you don't have to select anything, just leave it off. And if you have any issues with this tool, please contact us by chat. The questions will be also answered at the end of the event. Please use the Q&A module to share your questions. This is also located at the lower part of your Zoom window. The questions shared through the chat will have less probability of being answered. We will do our best to answer as the most questions we can. Thank you very much for joining us. Brain and Learnings. This is an initiative by the school Colegio Hacienda Los Alcaparros, the musical Brain and STEAM Learning 2017. Scientific Brain. Mathematical Brain 2020-2021. To see the previous talks online, please go to our website.
Les presentamos a Rosita Caro.
We would like now to introduce you Rosita Caro. She is the founder and director of the school Hacienda Los Alcaparros.
Buenas.
Very well.
Buenas tardes,
Good afternoon, good morning, depending where you are. So we have finally reached today with a great satisfaction of now closing this fourth symposium of the mathematical brain, which has had a significant impact at an institutional level, but also a significant impact in other institutions and in educational practices of many maths teachers who have followed and joined us in these sessions proposed by our school. So once again, I will introduce to you the three people who have joined us in these different conferences. I will remind you the names of the person in the order in which they presented. So the first person who participated was Dr. Roger Antonsen, professor from the Oslo University in Norway. He's also informatics professor and a very renowned person in this field. Dr. Antonsen proposed mathematics as a process to discover patterns and also the possibility of the connection between mathematics and imagination and creativity. After this very, very beautiful and important conference, we had with us Dr. Yona Kangas. She is a PhD in education, and she also leads the doctorate of this same program in the Helsinki University, and who also supports and works in research in topics regarding play, specifically in the early childhood, and who has also developed, along with her research partners, a very significant work on the curriculum of mathematics and learning through play. Dr. Kangas showed us in her presentation that children from the earliest ages are actually mathematicians and that they have clear stages in which they develop more understanding in maths. And so it is very important to guide teachers how to enhance these different stages in children. And our last conference had a bit more to do with neuroscience investigation. And this was presented by Dr. Marie Amalric. She is a fellow from the Development Study Program in Harvard University, and she shared a very interesting conference in which she showed how these investigations are done on the human brains and specifically on how the brain learns and how researchers reach conclusions on how mathematical thinking is developed in children. So from a neuroscience standpoint, she showed us how the human brain is very flexible and how there is a whole inheritance of also evolutionary attributes so that it allows the brain to actually have a comprehension of this dimensional world and an understanding of relations between numbers. And with this last conference, we close this cycle where we go through imagination, play, and science. All these different conferences offered different standpoints. However, they were very much focused on having a broad scope that really prioritized the development of imagination in children and in young adults, and how this also is linked to maths and teaching maths and maths in the practical world. So with this very brief introduction, I now would like to welcome you all to this event, and now we will continue to the following part of this session. This will be a musical intervention, and then we will have a dialogue between our very special guests. And then we will also have a dialogue with our mathematics department. Thank you.
Bueno, entonces estamos aquí reunidos.
All right, so we are now gathered. Welcome to Dr. Marie, Dr. Antonsen, and Dr. Yona. Welcome to our panel. I understand that you have had the possibility of exchanging between you, and that after your participation in these conferences, you have had a previous conversation and you have prepared some important questions. So to start this dialogue, I would like to focus on the importance that educational institutions have to ask themselves, specifically for the process of maths learning, because as far as I understand, or as at least this was news in the newspaper, the local newspaper, Dr. Marie, that there have been very recent discoveries of maths related to the students' development, but not only on advantages, but the disadvantages that perhaps quitting learning maths can have later in life for these students. And this most recent research has shown also the importance of the encounter, the link between mathematics, imagination, creativity, and how there is also an important mathematical link with art. So I would like to introduce this first conversation with this topic, and then later give you the floor for you to share the questions you have prepared. But I would like to focus on these questions. Why do we as an educational institution should always have this really into account of the importance of math, and how this math learning has also a lot to do with a more artistic or creative side. So who would like to take the floor and start off this conversation?
If I may, so if we consider the learning pathway from the birth, so I'm working with the early childhood education, so maybe I catch here and then I throw the imaginary ball to further on to Roger and Marie. But if you consider little children, 2-year-old, 5-year-old, even 9, 10-year-old, they are still working also with the kind of mathematical skills in the world of imagination and in the world of arts. They are visualizing, they are making tactile experiences, they are touching, they are seeing, they are hearing the music, and they can, in all of these kind of aspects that we consider as a subject, school subject, they are in fact using the mathematical brain. And then when they become adults, they somehow lost this connection. And my question as a teacher trainer is it because the school, or maybe Marie, is it because our brain somehow developed further on? So the imaginary ball comes here.
Very interesting. Marie?
Yeah, I can say a little bit about that. So yeah, I think it's like a real question for us, for the researchers who are trying to understand the neural basis of mathematics. And like you're asking how math relates to other domains. Basically, what we know so far is that, at least the evidence that we have from looking at how the brain is processing mathematics, is that it seems fairly dissociated from language. So it seems fairly dissociated from language, but also it's reusing regions of the brain that are very ancient in the evolution, and that are there for visual and spatial processes and basic numerical processes. So we have here something that is interesting, because it's not, math doesn't seem to be very relying on words, on linguistic skills, but seems to be relying more, as you were saying, on probably visualizing, imagining spatial relations, or understanding patterns. That's where Roger. And maybe also, actually, I would want to say something. I think if you ask me to give a definition of mathematics right now, what I would say is that it's maybe one of the only domain where you're always invited to look at something under very different perspectives. What is it to understand an object, and a mathematical object? It's probably to understand many definitions of this object and many properties, and somehow make connections with other mathematical objects, but also with concrete objects. And that doesn't seem to happen through language. It seems to happen through something that is maybe more abstract than that. At least that's the way I would think about it. So that's all I'm going to say for now, but there can definitely other things.
So this is a challenge for Roger.
Yeah. Okay, I'll jump in. Thank you. That was wonderful. I enjoy your perspectives a lot. I think a lot of these discussions are missing the part you mentioned, Mary, which is what is mathematics. And we talk about, we want to increase mathematical understanding in students, but we never really stop to think about what that means. I have two things that I want to throw into this discussion. One is that it has to do with patterns. I think that's the most generic and beautiful definition of mathematics, that it's the discovery and representation of patterns. And it doesn't have to be visual. It could be temporal. It could be spatial in another way, or it could be causal. So something happens because of something else. So there's this discovery of patterns that children do to a large extent, because they're navigating the world for the first time, and they're discovering all these patterns. And then I think there's so many similarities between child development and adult development, and I feel that sometimes a lot of these things get lost. So we should keep that openness that children have, and playfulness. I'm so happy this is mentioned, because I think it's so crucial also for adult learning, because in the playful process, you make mistakes, and through the mistakes, you learn about the patterns. So in my mind, these are all, they're all connected, these concepts. The concept of a pattern, the concept of playfulness and failure, and this openness. The second thing I really want to throw into this discussion is the language aspect, that you say it's dissociated from mathematics, but for me, mathematics is very metaphorical. you're building a bridge between two different domains. If a metaphor is anything, it is to connect one domain with another. For example, a very abstract domain with something very concrete. And this is how we often teach mathematics. We say, here are 2 apples, here are 3 apples, and voila, we have 5 apples, and this is a metaphor. It's not real. It's connecting, it's real, but it's not, we're talking about one thing in terms of another. Now, if language contributes anything, it's analogical thinking. Like we think of one thing in terms of another, and it's so powerful. And that is so interwoven with language. I don't know how to separate that ability from language. That mapping ability to say that, okay, a number, a real number is a point on a line. Now, when I say that, that is a metaphor because there's nothing here. There's nothing here. It is a line that I'm drawing in the air. And we're explaining what a number is by pointing to this line. So that in itself is a mapping from one domain, which is the world of numbers, to this thing in front of me. And I think this is sort of what we do in language all the time. We're using the power of language to communicate, because we also do it when we communicate our feelings. Like, I feel like a rock, or I feel like a fountain, or something like this. And it's nothing is ever concrete. So I want to throw those 2 things in the mix: patterns and metaphors.
Can I clarify something? Because, okay, I want to clarify the point that we have actually no idea of how language plays into, talking like for the brain, right? We have no idea yet how language is actually playing into conceptualizing a mathematical object. What we can see and what I'm talking about right now is more of the dissociation between math and language once the concept is encoded, because this is something that we have actually reproduced many times in our experiments. But that doesn't mean that language is not involved in the encoding of the object, in the conceptualization part of it, right? So I just wanted to clarify that.
Yeah.
Jenna, how do you approach that topic between I don't know if we can use with the little ones the word metaphor or the language in general? What is the reflection about?
Yeah, thank you, Rosita. Yeah, that's kind of challenging point here, because if we talk about babies, they don't have language. So they literally can't have the metaphors if we consider them that they only exist through the language and through the conceptualization of the kind of word apple. Because when I say it, I think that everybody of you now have the red or green piece of fruit in your mind. Am I correct? But the babies don't have yet, the word apple doesn't mean anything to them. They don't have the kind of language-based conceptions, but we still know from, it's really neuroscience research from little babies' brains that they can somehow separate little quantities, but they don't have the word for the numbers yet, and they can't communicate, but they still can, they have some functions on the brain that they already kind of know that there is one or couple, but they don't use these kind of verbalized concepts. They understand it somehow differently. But then comes, again, I'm coming back to the challenge of education, that all the teachers are, adults. They kind of needs to be adults. So is there something that we miss in any kind of education, in any context of education, where the more powerful and more knowledgeable members of the society kind of train the little ones or those who lack yet the abilities of, well, contextualize or even lack the vocabulary. If we talk of, well, children under 5-year-old, their vocabulary is not yet so wide as is ours. And I have to say that I didn't understand all the words Marie is using here, because neuroscience is kind of way beyond my field of expertise. And if I start to talk education jibber jabber here, I think I can lost maybe you too also. So also that different languages and different set of words don't every time mean the exactly same thing. But as Roger explaining, that there is some kind of maybe universal language of mathematics. And that's something that I have been personally also exploring through my research with children in different EU countries who do not speak the language of the school as their first language, because the mathematics kind of is something that everybody can understand, or so we could think. But anyhow, we find out that when we consider, for example, what kind of games or what kind of play situation children choose in when they are 3-4-year-old, the children who lack of the school language, they don't choose block play or constructive play. And then when we measure their mathematical abilities at the age of 6, they are beyond of the level of the average 6-year-old level, at least in the Finnish context. So somehow, in very early, the challenges also in language also influence to maybe not the understanding of mathematics, but at least children's able kind of how they can communicate it to the teachers who evaluate them. So is there somehow way that we can kind of solve this and let the mathematics be the kind of universal language for every student? Or are we stuck with the language in education?
Wow. ¿Quién quiere responder esa pregunta?
So who would like to answer Jona's questions? So is there a mathematical universal language, and is this what we should actually explore more in schools and teach more in schools? And what would this universal language of mathematics be?
That's almost a philosophical question that you're asking, I think. And Roger, you can also answer. I didn't mean to jump in just right away, but the thing I want to say is that we've been after this this language of mathematics in our experiments, in our studies. We started with geometry. Also because we have evidence from societies in the Amazon, for example, where we can test that as you were saying, for babies, you don't need to have a word to have a concept, which is already something that I think is a very, very important first brick, right? So you don't need to have a word to have a concept. And so we can see in the societies that people have concepts of, for example, symmetries, different shapes, what it is to be continuous, things like that, without having a dedicated word to say that. Okay, so that's one thing. So now the question is, okay, if there is no word for that, how do you explain that we are able to build on those concepts too? It's not even that you can have a concept without the word. It's also that you can discover concepts from the environment and combine concepts to build new concepts. So how do you do that without words? And so we've been after the hypothesis of a language of thought in geometry, a geometrical language of thought that would basically be something like you have building blocks that are geometrical in by nature, like symmetries, rotations, things like that. And you have the inherent ability to produce recursive structures. So you'll combine those into embedded structures. And if you do that, you can actually produce a definition for a square. You can produce a definition for a triangle, etc., etc. So we've been after that. So that's maybe one avenue to try and understand if mathematical is actually, you know, a language per se and a universal language, which I believe, but we're still after trying to define what it is. And there are different ways of addressing this issue. You can ask, what does it mean for something to be mathematical for the brain? And also, you know, what are the building blocks of this language? Because if you're talking about a language, that means we have some sort of words and some sort of grammatical rules. So we have to figure out what are those, and if it's even reasonable to think that there might be some inherent ways of thinking about mathematics in form of a language of thought of this form. So this is something that we've been trying to address. And it's very complicated. But then I mean, precisely for school, I still think that language is the most convenient way to communicate ideas. And I think if you want my opinion on that, I would almost argue that the problem might not be exactly to use language. The problem might be that there might be something else here that is preventing children from understanding mathematical concepts. And that has to do not with language per se, but with, again, this idea of diversifying the perspectives on something. And we start to have evidence that people will conquer a counterintuition about, like a scientific counterintuition at some point, not because you're going to give them a particular and specific argument against this idea, but because you're going to give them an accumulation of evidence that it is like, that this is a counterintuition. And the order doesn't seem to really matter. It doesn't. So if you want to convince someone that you can have parallel lines that are going to intersect on a sphere, it doesn't matter from where you start to say that. What matters is the number of arguments that you're gonna give, and the diversity of the perspectives that you're gonna give.
Yeah, this is so interesting. Can I jump in?
Sure.
So, for the first question, whether or not there is a universal mathematical language, so I tend to think that it's not, because it's very arbitrary what we use as a representation of something else. However, Marie is talking about something more fundamental, which is amazing and to me a little bit magical. Do we have some part of the brain that is somehow making conceptual connections that is not just representing something, but actual connections, like what is a square or what is a triangle? And I find that incredibly fascinating. And the fact that one thing is represented in terms of in terms of something else is something we start doing very, very young. And Jonna probably knows much more about this than I do. But at what point does it become obvious that there's a difference between what is being represented and what is representing? And for me, this is so fundamental for all of mathematics, because every representation of something in terms of another, it could be as simple as a name referring to an actual person, is a mapping again from one domain to another. So it's like a metaphor. It's not a metaphor, but it's a naming activity. There's one thing names another, and it's representational. And I find that absolutely amazing that one thing can represent another. And this just corroborates what I've been thinking all along, what you're saying, Maria, about the diversity of perspectives, because I think every representation of one thing in terms of another encapsulates some sort of meaning or concept or perspective. If you think widely about it, it has some sort of perspective on that thing that is being represented. There's a metaphor for this, which is the map and the territory. The territory is the real thing. It's out there. And we are using maps to navigate the territories. And maps can be different. We can have geographical maps. We can have just, a very simple map, which is very crude. You're like, this is black, this is white, or this is red, this is green, or we can have a topological map, which is much more detailed. And in order to understand the territory, you need to have as many maps as possible, because some maps are good for some things and some maps are good for others. So I really love this thought that a diversity of perspectives gives understanding. I'm willing to go so far as to say that's the definition of understanding. It is just the ability to switch around and look at something from another point of view. And I think mathematics is helping. It's a two-way street. So mathematics helps us to be good at this, but also being good at changing patterns and finding out what's invariant or what doesn't change when we change our perspective is a part of mathematics. So I think, anyway, this is all very super interesting, I think, and there's so many unanswered questions, but we're poking at the really essence of math here, I think. So that's interesting.
Yeah.
Yes, I will dare to make an intervention. I have to say, I am not a mathematician myself, but when for example, one is taught a school program, right? And we propose, well, we must teach math, social sciences, natural sciences. We are assuming then that this or the student will be accompanied by all these fields, right? To view the world, to see the world from sciences, from mathematics. And in this accompaniment, well, each field has its patterns, its parameters, meaning each science defines its own patterns. And I would dare to say that an important initiative in maths is to guide students to see the world through patterns, through the different dimensions, through the different shapes, and through these different correspondence between these attributes, and that these can be a way of seeing the world. So I'm not so sure that this intention, for example, through play in pre-K and in other ways to apply these learnings, and with, for example, standardized tests and the very, very heavy load of teaching, for example, maths just from algorithms and problem solving and strategies, and then test them on standardized tests. I guess my question is, maths, in how maths is taught, I want to know this relationship between how can we achieve a mathematical thinking and a mathematical brain, taking into account taking into account the whole pressure that exists within the educational system and organizations, which I think poses an obstacle for the teaching of maths. What do you think about this?
Not an easy question. Roger, Marie, any ideas? I was kind of catching something that you were saying here about how we can teach mathematical thinking skills. Are they similar to critical thinking skills? Anyhow, some scientific thinking skills? What Marie was explaining here, that how we can kind of create this accumulation of evidence to make maybe the learners not to believe, but maybe understand and remember the facts, and through that kind of build the consensus of the concept. And that's something that I'm often asked around the world when I'm traveling and, well, meeting teacher students and kind of giving in-service teacher training, that are we really teaching thinking skills, or are we just teaching memorizing skills? And I think that's one crucial question for education anyway, because if we are only teaching memorizing skills, it's only kind of repetition. And, well, those children who have the photographic memorization are the best of the best. And then those children who may be struggling with the memorizing functions and self-regulation skills have troubles in education. But is it really thinking when it comes to that? How many facts can you remember from the book or from the presentation that the teacher was giving you yesterday, and then she's having your first thing in the morning, let's have an exam, but you can remember. And if it continues, it creates this kind of cycle of, I have to memorize more, I'm behind of the others, I have to catch them, and there is lesser and lesser time for the real thinking. The other problem is what you also, Rosita, mentioned, is about teaching subjects as kind of individual definitions for the concepts, but never discussing between these definitions of the concepts. I think, Roger, you mentioned it very beautiful, that it's diversity of understandings.
That was Marie.
Sorry, Marie.
But I agree.
Yeah, so it's diversity of understandings. But do we really have in school room for diversity of understandings? I think in arts class we have, or maybe even in social sciences. I mean, if we are talking about, for example, so some parts like emotional education, can we have one single definition for a concept of joy of learning? No, we can't. But for somehow the teachers intend in math to have, they have one page, there is all the right answers. And if you can't have the exact same, well, symbols there, or exact same language there that is in the kind of ready-made exam, then it's F, or then you have the red pen there. But you never give as a teacher the red pencil in art class, or when you are discussing with the student with, for example, emotions and how they are influencing on your personal learning and behavior. So should we have more room for discussing between these definitions or patterns which are here within the school subject, how we open up the cocoon and let the butterfly go to the other subject too? And this is something that even here in Nordic countries, the teachers still, even they have said that we have the best teacher education system, we are still struggling, because it's so much easier as a teacher to just check if the exam is correct or not than really listen the children's voice, really understand, trying to respect the diversity of understanding. And I think maybe there we can find some answers.
I find it very interesting that there is this tension or difference between, on the one side, what many professional mathematicians or mathematics at university level experience, which is this wonderful sense of freedom. You can do anything. You can travel into 4-dimensional space and make hyperbolic strange objects that you can do strange things with. And you can assume things that are false, and you can play with your mind in this wonderful way, which is characterized by an openness. Much like theater sports or improvising, you have this tremendous amount of open-mindedness. Everything is all right. You know, you come to me with an idea and I'm going to accept it and play with it. On the other hand, you have this rigorousness where there is a right answer. And it's much easier to grade exams this way because it's right or it's wrong. But it's very closed. It's a closed mind setting. It does not have this openness. So it's not very strange that a lot of kids don't like math, because they experience math from this perspective, this very closed, tense, right or wrong, black and white, non-creative, non-colorful, sort of strict world. Whereas if you go further along, you get this wonderful experience of, freedom. And I'm not saying to abolish memorization or homework. I think this is very important. I think you need memorization, and I think you need homework. But there's an ultra optimism that if you do enough exercises, the understanding will just come from above, like a magic wand. You understand things. There's a beautiful quote that I often mention by John von Neumann. He said, "In mathematics, you don't understand things, you just get used to them." And I think this is a very interesting question. What is the difference between getting used to something and actually understanding something? And I don't think there's a good answer to this, but maybe it has to do with being able to see things from many, many different perspectives. And that's the essence of teaching, I think. Because if you're a teacher and there's a student that does not understand, you have to change the story. You have to tell the story in a different way. You're not going to tell the same story again in the same way. You're going to tell a different story, a different metaphor, and then hopefully that will help. So I liked what you said, Jonna, about listening to the student, because this is so difficult to understand. What a student experiences. You have to have a beginner's mind and not know any of the things in order to do this. And that requires a tremendous amount of being open-minded that is difficult to achieve. I'll stop there and give the word to Marie, I think.
No, that was so interesting, both of you. I think I want to react to what you were saying, Roger. Because I think we shouldn't get rid of routines in like memorizing thing either. And the reason for that is that, okay, we too often have the idea that mathematics are only built from concrete things, and then it's kind of like a pyramidal construction, we would say. We too often have only this idea that it only goes up. But what we see more and more is that it also goes down. So there is some retroaction loop, if we could say, where actually what seems to happen is that the symbolic knowledge that you get at some point, the formal knowledge that you're going to get at some point, is reshaping also the way you're perceiving things. Yes. So I think we have to be very at peace with the idea of like still having memorization and routines, because this is actually also feeding into a different perception of maybe lower level ideas. So I wouldn't get rid of those.
Hay una pregunta, la última pregunta que podemos responder.
Yes, there is a question in the chat that is referring to what Marie just mentioned, and what Roger just mentioned. And the question is it possible to reach this mathematical freedom, or that freedom in mathematics without actually going through the rigor that learning maths imposes? That's the question that relates a bit to what was later said between Roger and Marie.
I want to answer with a metaphor that is a very old and beautiful metaphor. It is a metaphor of a bird that flies in the air. Because you would think that if the bird did not have any air resistance, then it would be much easier to fly. But it is necessary to have this resistance in order to fly. And I think here we also are touching on that. You cannot just fly. You need a little resistance, and you need to fight with, so to speak, the representations and learn that as well. And that's not easy. I had a teacher, a professor once who only taught from the top down. And it was as if he was flying. He was right up there and he saw the whole world, you know, from his point of view. He understood everything. But we, as the students, we needed, you know, symbols and very detailed proofs in order to achieve that vision, that broad perspective. So it became obvious to me that it's not sufficient just to be flying, so to speak. You need also to do all this memorization, all that hard work.
Muchísimas gracias por esa metáfora, porque es muy
Thank
bonito.
you very, very much for this metaphor, because it's beautiful to think about it this way, and it's also visually beautiful. Well, obviously time is always against us, and we are reaching our time limit for this panel. So now we will invite to this panel with you three, Omar and René. They are both joining us, and they will tell us what has happened in the mathematics department in the school after listening to your webinars and conferences and this dialogue that we just had. So you have an opportunity to exchange with teachers from our school. So we have René Garizao and Omar Fuquen. Omar, are you? Yes, we can see you now. Great, I am here. Okay. So for all the attendees that are joining us, Omar Fuquen is the director of the maths department of the school Colegio Hacienda Los Alcaparros, and he is in charge of the maths program of the school, and René is the director of maths for primary school. And they both have been very active in this work that they will present, that is regarding concepts and projects and maths experiences that have been arising since we have these math colloquiums in the school. So I will give the floor to them, and later after that you will have an exchange with our panelists.
Something, and it's about what the panelists have just said. There is like a big problem, and it's about language, probably. Is the way that students can present their thinking through a mathematical way. That's the reason by which at school, what we try to do is to focus on a concept. In this concept, there is an understanding which is behind. And as you mentioned, there is an accumulation of evidences for that, recursive structures. And then there is a lot of perspectives of the concept and representation. But there are some objects inside those concepts, and they have properties. There is an order between them. There are some operations, and there are many connections. There are some connections, and that's like the way we see, and the language, I think that plays a very important role in here. Thank you very much. Now I would like to give the word to René in order to see what we are doing at school.
Okay, so thank you so much. My name is René. I really want to thank Rosita, Sophia for this great opportunity, Roger, Jonah, Marie, and the students and teachers who are coming along with us today. I think since we started this mathematical brain and the presence of our three panelists, we were really inspired in primary. I think it was a wonderful opportunity to rearrange our mathematical thinking as teachers, as students, and as coordinators. I want to thank you for that, because you were like one decisive point in and our mathematics teaching. I will share my screen right now in order to tell and show you all here present, what we did in primary, and maybe, because I think we are on the right spot with the 3 panelists, and maybe we can also answer those kind of questions you were talking about, and you were trying to find very deep understanding in how to answer those difficult questions we have and we are facing. I will start sharing my screen. I hope, I need your, tell me if you are able to see my screen so far, and then I will probably continue. Are you able to see it?
Yes.
Okay. So this is I'm going to start with a very brief summary. It doesn't take longer, but I'm going to show you something what we did in primary that really inspires us as teachers to do it the way we do it and the way we want to face mathematical thinking, communication, perspectives, and imagination and creativity. And we believe in those kind of points that you have already talked about the whole time. We really believe in that. And I want to believe that my team, my teachers team, they also have this, they really have acquired this passion, this beauty, because there is beauty in mathematics. And at the same time, I want to point out that mathematics and this kind of beauty, this different perspective of seeing the world is in every corner and every sitting in our lives. You can touch it. We want to make kids visualize everything what is hidden, what they don't see in nature, but it is there. And we use mathematics in order to do that, to visualize what is hidden behind this one. The way we started in primary, and I think this is very Alcaparros, this is like the Alcaparros DNA, is we started with web that I'm going to visualize right now. And we start with a structure that is very adult. We create a structure in order to organize our ideas and teachings, and we create questions, because I think questions are really relevant for our teaching. The first part was center in grade 1. We center our teaching in grade 1 with creativity and imagination. Although we say focus, but we touch all the fields in that's what I want to talk about right now. So, and then we created one question altogether: how do imagination, creativity, and play help us learn? That was our grade, first grade. Then we go into perspective and optical illusions. How does our brain trick us? So in order to really what we see, is it true what we see? Is it true what it comes out? Or can we approach this, what we see in another perspective, to learn something new? At this point, I would point out that if we don't have the language, we invent it. If we don't know how to communicate, we find a way to communicate it. That you will see right now, it is something where I really find the beauty of mathematics. So the next part that we did in grade 3 was mathematical thinking, reasoning, and representation. There you can find these rigorous algorithms and different kind of things that we have learned so far in order to find solutions. But it is not the only way to find solutions. We can find a different language to describe how do I understand, how do I find solutions. Then the next part, and that is very beautiful, this one, patterns and representation, complete spaces. That was when Roger made his first presentation before Alcaparros the first time. I was touched. I was really, I think I had the same frequency how to understand mathematics, and that was a very special focal point where we wanted to express this kind of thinking as well. Then we went in grade 5, the journey inside our brain. And our question to that was, how can senses and emotions change our mathematical brain? Is it possible that through senses, we can change how we think? Something that we consider very obvious, but it is not quite obvious how to use our senses to find patterns, to find, to observe, and to create a different way to express things. That was very interesting in this case. And after this one, we go back, and then I will go back here, and then I start with a very simple demonstration what we do. There were many different things, but this is only one creation. It was called the Mystery Machine. And I will also only show this picture in order to say what the kids wanted to solve with this one. How can I give an input to obtain what I see? And it is, we could probably, this is like the beginnings of an equation. And what do I put over there? And then what goes out there? But maybe there is much more behind the Mystery Machine. How do I represent? How can I visualize it? What it really, when I put something in there and something goes out. And that was really one beautiful example. This is the reason why it's so beautiful, that how kids could represent this Mystery Machine was also an amazing experiment over there. Then we go into grade 2, and it was perspective and illusions. And this is a way to communicate something that we want to communicate. We use lines, regular figures, 2D shapes. And as we really observe these images, it's a different way to represent a heart. I don't need like a heart to be red and this film. I can represent it in different ways using whatever I have, lines, curves, and different kind of figures in order to communicate how something could look like, but it appears in a different way. That was also very deep and very interesting in second grade, and we enjoy that. We teachers really enjoy this. And then we go into grade 3, and then it was like finding a solution to a task for using the creativity and imagination. And the point was that, so how can we find the real measure, or trying to make an estimation? How big is the building where I live in? How do I measure it if I don't have millions of rulers if I cannot go very high up to? And that is another way, so that using our rigorous numbers and algorithms, we can find solutions. But we need to approach that kind of problem with a different perspective, with a different point of view. Otherwise, it would be the same as always. Okay, I will call someone to make a measure for me, and then he will probably obtain, and I have the fact. It is that and that much. It is not. So we can find another way to find our solution to real problems, not only to this one. And then we go, this was really amazing. I was really surprised. We started in music, mathematics. There was a beautiful combination and co-working, co-team between music and arts and mathematics. And then, okay, we are going to try to combine these 3 different musical notes. How can we represent it? How does it sound? And we learned about symmetry, about different shapes, angles, why it's like that, how could it be everything together, different kind of mathematical concepts involved in there. But at the end, can't remember when we were taking our last results with the students, one student asked, it is already recorded as a video, how can I represent a musical rhythm in 3D? That was, if we can represent it as 2D, how can I represent it in 3D? That was we were very surprised how this student, and normal, not a mathematical, not a genius, it was the combination of different kind of languages and words and concepts that the student really came to this beautiful question. How can I represent a musical rhythm in 3D? Wonderful, wonderful. And that would be probably the continuation of this project. Really wonderful. So, and then this is more or less, and then I will show in the last part what is the process that Alcaparros normally use in order to get into one result, one deep understanding, one way to understand mathematics. First, we can invite, normally we invite any kind of expert talking, could be Jonah, could be Marie, could be Roger. We invite someone, we wanted to talk about the brain, the mathematical brain, how the brain looks like. And this person, I don't want to, it's in there, the link is in the chat in case you want to look through. One doctor, neurosurgery doctor, he talked about how does the EEG work? How does our brain waves work? How does it has a big influence in our brain? How do we think? How when we sleep? Different kind of things we learn, frequencies and all different things. Then we investigate. We go into further reading. We give the opportunity to students to investigate and make research. Okay, if the brain looks like, what does it have to be with math? Where is math behind? Further reading, and then this is it's not coming only from the initiative from students. I think if we teachers, if we adults do not create the appropriate environment with as many tools as we can, then this kind of beautiful question probably wouldn't come out so easily. But it is a journey. We have to go a journey with all students we did. And then we use videos, we use different kind of literature that is represented over there. And then suddenly we think about, okay, let's make a simulation. How can we visualize these kind of brainwaves in our head? How is it possible? How can we understand better without digging or cutting our brain in two parts? How can we represent these brainwaves? What is going on there? And then we adults said, okay, let's try a digital simulation. And then the final result was a beautiful intervention with two girls. I hope that we can engage more girls into this kind of beauty, because for me, mathematics is like poetry. It is something you create, something new. You can create every time you start working with the kids as a teacher. And then you go here. And this I will try to show you a little bit, not too much, and then they start and they talk about frequencies and they talk how they are connected.
So here we have our software that helps us monitor, see the frequencies that we have. So right now, as you can see, it's in a red light because of all the light that is coming through from the glass. So you can see the frequencies are high and low, like they are overexcited because they are sometimes high and sometimes low. When we cover it a tiny bit, you can see that the green is changing and it's almost a straight line. Yeah. And that is what gets us the most focus. Yeah.
And so on. This is only a very brief description what they do and everything what they have worked on. But at the end, there is not only mathematics in there. It's mathematics and it's much more. It's a different way to communicate what they have learned. It's a different way to explain things. And it is also very valid how they explain it, which words they got right now used to communicate, a different vocabulary, expanding the way to approach. It was not only, okay, the way to do this one and to understand brainwaves was this and this. No, we decided to approach different kind of situations, as you saw from first grade until fifth grade, that there are different ways to communicate knowledge and deep understanding. And not only the regular and algorithms give us the real deep understanding we want. I would say that it is there are many infinite different ways to have perspective, to communicate, to have really deep understanding. And this is what primary math is trying to enhance in our students. We teachers, we are learning every day how to do it as well. It's not something that is quite quite obvious for us as well. We need to learn also on the way too. And thank you so much. Now, I hope you more or less had a very brief description what mathematics in primary looks like and how we love it. And then Omar, this is now I give you the word, and then I hope you can continue with our teachers, students and teachers in middle school and high school. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Rene. I think that is amazing. I just want to continue what Rene is saying. So I'm going to share my presentation. I don't know if you can see this. I'm going to share with my audio. Thank you. Can you see my presentation?
Oh, good.
Yes.
Thank you.
Can you see my presentation?
Yes.
Yes, Omar, see.
Okay, so I'll go on. What I'm going to try to do is just to present first what we did, the conferences, challenges, what we did in the math week, and the projects. Thank you very much for all of you for your participation or for inspiring us to do this. I hope we can do it very often. Let me go first with the challenges. I just want to show how we face the challenges at school. And I got to tell you, honestly, that was really hard for us. The most difficult thing was to make art of math. Probably we are not used to do that. That's the reason by which what we think is that is the most important thing for us in our learning. How can we make art of math? And here I want to present some of the things that the students did, how they faced the challenges. I was going to explain, but I think that we are going to run out of time, so that's what I'm just going to show. These are some examples. In the previous one, some students did with some notes, and this is what they got. Okay, these are some of the examples of what the students did. And I like this one especially, the way that the student does it. This is the example. Well, I'm going to go to the next. This one. And here we have some pictures for the Bubbles Challenge, what students did at school.
make a bubble with a square shape? The answer to this question is no, because the word does not have shape. It needs to take the shape of what is resting on. But since the bubbles are not supported by anything, they have to go out the way through the center, and there is air preventing the ball from floating. Water to the center, the water with the salt take a similar.
Science have proved that if bubbles were only made of water, they will evaporate in the moment that I created. So we need to use soap, glycerin, to protect them.
Don't worry, I just want to show them what the students did. So
hi everyone. Today we will read an interesting expression. It is really great, and it is about bubbles. In perspective, usually bubbles are spherical. There are bubbles. We can see that regardless of if the one is round or square or triangle or strong as it is here. And you can see it's going to so we need to wait 10 minutes so it can get freezed.
Those are some examples that we had for the challenges, but now let's go to the projects, like following what René did. We did exactly the same thing. I mean, what we did about the projects in the brain, it was a little bit difficult because we didn't know what to do. So we just wanted to see how can we connect patterns, games, geometry, algebra, emotions, measurements, spectral listening, representations, problem solving, modeling, enjoying, creativity, optical illusions, statistics, and the brain. And then we came up with some questions that we asked students. Just wrote some questions that are amazing. I actually don't know how to solve them. There's many questions that I don't know how to answer. How can I use my imagination to make mathematics, for example? How can we use mathematics to be better human beings? Mathematics to be better human beings. And how can something as exact as mathematics explain something as exact as unpredictable as the real world? Those are questions, and we have like more than 100 questions that are amazing for me. So in this case, what we did was just to go from grades in 6th grade with the game design and mathematical logic. How is the development of logical and mathematical thinking gathered by the game design processes? And I'm going to give the word to Mohamed, who can better explain this project.
Hey, Omar, thank you. Hi, this is Mohamed here. I'm the grade 6 mathematics teacher. I'll quickly pull up my presentation. No, not this, sorry. Wait. Yeah. All right, the focus was derived from Jonah's concept of how games, fun, a playful environment can help cater better education and also foster interest and creativity among students. So based on that concept, most of the activities that we did this year were based around gameplay, serious gameplay, which had objectives, and we also had which encourage them, which also help them understand, identify patterns, identify numbers, relationships between different kinds of numbers, and also go to the abstraction part of understanding how to do calculations between them, etc. And eventually it led to the creation of games which was which in my perspective, I consider as a synthesized perspective, where when you apply something, when you synthesize something, it helps you augment what concepts have already been learned. So based on that focus, we started off with exploring the concepts, as I told you, through games, to play, through discussions, and a variety of perspectives that were possible. And once the students had a sufficient foundation of most of these concepts, we went and digged deeper into working on game designing and the game design theory and process, where we started off with projects that were focused on a general objective, specific objectives, which I'll eventually shed light on in the next few slides. We also worked on how planning and designing, because planning and designing also is not just a skill set, but is directly related to algorithms, which is a part of sequential planning. And eventually the students got time to test. Some of them did, some of them did not. But the objective was for them to understand if their work actually met the objectives that it was designed for. And finally, in a project like these, I believe that as teachers, we also need to reflect upon whether we were able to achieve what we did, not just in terms of getting good grades. Obviously, in an academic and a school environment perspective, grades are of importance, and student achievements in their standards are of importance. But to get a qualitative understanding whether a student was able to get different perspectives of a certain concept or not. How many of those students got those concepts? Were they able to understand them and apply them in a different context, a context that they've never been put in before? So based on all these factors, I have my own reflection about the process, and the students have their own as well. Here, I'll be sharing some of the important and a brief of some of these things. The general objective was to create games to impact on the human development. And specific objectives were developed by students, and they chose themes. So some of them chose themes of improving imagination in the game with the help of the game design process. Some of them chose a theme where they were focused on improving digital responsiveness. How quickly does a person improve typing on a keyboard? How does that responsiveness with devices increase by playing the games that they develop? So different kids had different themes, and we had a lot of planning and development in platform. The simplest one that we could find was Scratch, a block-based programming platform where the focus is not on the language, but rather on the logic. The students also, some of them got to test, experiment, also test this on people, get back the results as to whether the game that they actually had the impact that they originally planned to or not. And from my reflection, I find that almost 70% of the students, they enjoyed learning math via games. This is something which I also took as an inspiration or as a derivative from the talks from Jonah, that it's important to present students an environment where they can find that they're learning things through play, through fun. And it was really successful. I'd say 70% is a good reflection. I still am trying to figure out where I went wrong, or where was there this gap of the other 30% students who could not probably engage or understand or enjoy the math learning process. But as I told you, we teachers are also learning. It's a process, it's a research process for ourselves, which we are trying to explore and better over time. And students who found inspirations from the games that they played, from the different activities, different objectives for which they themed their games on, they developed their own games. And the development of games also brought in an enhancement and enrichment of the concepts that they already knew, like concepts of integers, concept of coordinate geometry, and locating objects on a graph, concept of algorithms, etc. Sorry,
I'm so sorry to interrupt you, Mohammed. We have lots of things to say, but I think that we need to stop just here.
Skip to the list. I'll quickly give a demo. See, here I'm showing some of the games that were developed. So I don't have all the works here. I've just selected a few to show to you. And eventually, when we have time in the projects on Friday, the students will share links to their games so that you can play, and also give them a feedback about the objectives for which the game was designed for. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sophie. we have some other teachers, but I think that we have to wrap in this moment. I don't know, Rosita, if you want to say something in this moment.
No, I think that estamos quedándonos un poquito cortos de tiempo.
So we're very, very short on time now. So I think that it would be very interesting that our international guests could have a very brief exchange of based on the last two presentations that we have seen from you, Omar and Rene. Yeah, we are aware of this. We know that there are teachers and students amongst our attendees that would have liked to participate and present. Well, Roger, Yona, Marie, I don't know if you have additional time to extend the session a bit and have an exchange with students and teachers, or if you are really short on time.
I'm a little bit short on time. I don't know about the others.
I can extend a little.
Okay.
Yeah, I can also extend a little, but it's already 9:30 here in Finland, so I'm the opposite side of the globe, and it really is quite late here. So sorry about that. But if we continue for 15 minutes or so, and
okay, I think that because the kids might be very excited to have.
Yeah, I would love to see the students' presentation.
Yeah. But Roger, think if you may leave whenever you feel it's okay. And thank you very much for being here. Thank you so much.
Can I just say that it was really great to see the projects very briefly. And there are 2 or 3 things that I think was really great. One of them is apart from all the projects, the fact that Rene was emphasizing imagination and how inventive mathematics is, that you actually invent a notation or a representation, I think is very powerful. And I'm so happy to see that you're using Arduino and making things. The project with the brain and the measurements was very powerful. And I'm so happy that girls are being emphasized in this. And it makes me very happy to see. And I can say so much more. This was very inspiring and wonderful to see, but I'll stop there.
Thank you very much for being with us. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. Entonces, Omar, podemos decir.
All right, so Omar, we can invite the students to share their projects now.
No te oigo, estás con el micrófono apagado.
Okay.
Omar, you are muted. Okay, so I would like to invite Lorenzo so he can tell us a bit about the 6th grade maths project. Lorenzo, are you here? Yes, I'm right here. Okay, Lorenzo, would you like to tell us a bit about your project very briefly and how you did it?
So can you see the presentation? Okay, so hi, my name is Lorenzo, and today I wanted to present you Object Coin, which was like a game which we developed in the math subject. So we can start. So hi, my name is Lorenzo. I have 12 years and I study in Colegio Hacienda Los Alcaparros. And yeah, I was the one who developed the game. So first we have like the general objectives, which was like the topics which Mohammed was talking a little bit minutes ago. And the general objective of the game is to create a game that involves mathematics and has an impact on human development, not just in the development, but also in the way we think and the different points of view we have against the situations. The specific objective was like to design Pocket Coin, which by digital responses like moving the mouse or pressing the keys can improve the attention and creativity. And the goal of the game is like about a pack which must navigate quickly and capture as many coins as possible by not falling to lava. Like one of the things I want to mention is that like many of the parts of the investigation were based in John Canvas, which like has the PhD in education. And I think it's very important to mention him because many of the project is related to the topic that she studies. So I think we have many more skills and knowledge which was applied in the project, not just mathematics and statistics. There was many other abilities which were used in the project because I think the process of developing a game mostly increases you to find an objective and like thinking in a community, which things can help others or I don't know, teach them specific abilities and things like that. So I think the role of creating and designing a game can also be very important in the educational process. And right here, we can see a graph about like the results that we got in the experiment of the game. And that's, I wanted to highlight that when kids are younger and at younger age, like to 6 to 8 years or 9 to 15, I think they have the highest amount or range of performance in the experiment that we did. And I think it's very important to like potentiate that ability of kids like on paying attention and being more creative because they can also help the society and community in many ways. And finally, we have Pop the Coin, which is like the game that I designed. As you can see here is a little image and some of the programming defaults of the game were like the software that we use Scratch, which is very logic and easy to use. The programming type, which is like joining blocks to create sequences and patterns, as Roger was telling, because they can also help us like in the process of, I don't know, communicating mathematics by another language. And finally, the interface, which was graphic, and you can edit such as images or text and even sounds. So I think that was all my presentation. I think it was a little bit short, but I hope you enjoyed. And now I think we can continue.
Thank you very much, Lorenzo. That's amazing. And let me go very fast. I am so sorry with the teachers who already had their presentation. They want to introduce what they did. But I'm going to go directly to the students. Please, teachers, excuse me. We don't have so much time. I'm asked a pair of two more students. And here we go. Let me go to 7th grade. In the general project was viewing the universe through big numbers and the representation in the brain. So let me say, Janko and Matias, are you here?
Yep, I'm here. So basically, our presentation, our project was about representing the solar system in a way that it was actually proportional, so that the distances between all of the planets will be proportional, and that yeah, that's it. So we need to create a model, and we needed to represent the distances in real life. So that's basically the creation of the model. My group committed a mistake, and the problem with that is that the model was too small, and we didn't calculate correctly the decimals and the numbers, and it wasn't proportionate at all. So what we thought is that we were lost. We didn't have nothing to do. But then we thought of something. We actually thought that we could represent 3 planets or 3 solar bodies in real life. So we thought, how about every 1,000 kilometers, we represent them as 1 meter? So the distance, so we chose 3 bodies, which were the sun, Venus, and the earth, and we all represented them on an image. So each person would be standing on 1 point, and that person would be representing a body. So I'm just gonna share. So here is the image. You can see me, and you can see, well, Matias, please go on.
So as Janko said, we prefer to do a model in which we are the protagonists. We did a video in which the boy with the yellow jacket represents the sun. The boy in the middle represents Mercury, and the boy in the background represents our habitat, the Earth.
So yeah, now the unit was used was basically every 1,000 kilometers we would represent them as 1 meter. So basically the distance between between Mercury and the Earth was 84 million kilometers. So basically it was 84 steps. And the distance between the Sun and Mercury would be 69. So we would take 69 meters or 69 steps to take from the Sun and Mercury. And that's how we positioned all of them.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Enco.
Yes, yeah.
Let me go to 8th grade and words to models, which is how is mathematical modeling related to imagination and the development of the brain? Ignacio de la Pava, are you here? This is just some example.
Yes, Omar. So I don't
Thank
talk
you,
about
Ignacio.
the complex space.
We are all ears.
Okay, do you hear me? Okay, so for our project, my group and I wanted to learn about dreams and the way dreams relate to math. So what we did was first to research about the way dreams work, and we learned that we dream every night, but we sometimes or most times don't remember our dreams because our brain thinks it's not worth it to store information that we don't need. So then we started researching about the factors and the aspects that math improves in our brains and aspects that are related to dreams and to remembering dreams. So we researched about 3 main parts of our brain, which are memory, the neocortex, and the temporal lobe, which all are related to memory and things such as the imagination, which is like the main part of dreaming. So we deduced and hypothesized that if you did math before going to sleep, you would remember your dreams. But of course, we weren't sure, so we went ahead and made an experiment where people made the hardest a math problem they could solve before going to sleep, and well, see if they could remember their dreams. So the results of the experiment were that 1/3 of the people that made the experiment remembered their dreams after more than a few weeks or even months. So we concluded that it does work, but we don't know if the results are accurate because the pandemic like didn't allow us to experiment with the enough amount of people. Only a few people did the experiment, so we hope to keep like researching and experimenting to learn the actual answer to our question.
Thank you very much, Ignacio. Amazing. And we have so many projects in there. And in 9th grade, we have Manuel Londoño. Manu, you have like 2 minutes to present because I want you to excuse me, but I think that it was really interesting.
I'll try to be as fast as I can. Okay, our question for our project this year was if we learn mathematics in a linear way or into a matter of changing of perspective. I don't think that's the real question that was asked to us during the project, but I think the real question is, how do students manage to learn mathematics when you don't have the point of view which is expected from you, like, let's say, provided at the beginning of some learning? How is it that the human brain in each student works so you have a different perspective towards mathematics? I've always enjoyed working in advancing mathematics, and what I think it's that the most important thing in while learning mathematics is to keep pushing yourself towards new understandings of each topic, because even though you are seeking to see things how other people see it, probably big scientists, experts, or other people, if you don't continue to push yourself towards finding mathematics and the let's say, the scientific sense to the different things regarding your different passions or projects, you're never going to be able to enjoy and learn mathematics in a way in which you could construct a different understanding of each topic. To show this example, I had prepared a video which it shows for what I talked about in seeking new perspectives, but I'm just going to show you the final project because we don't have enough time. So tell me if you see my screen.
Yes.
This was the video. This was the final product I did for this presentation. And for example, one way that I got to love mathematics when I was younger was trying to find it in art and music, because believe it or not, I used to be really lazy about math and didn't understand why was it that it was important for us to learn it at school. But right now, I always try to get myself into questioning everything that is taught to me at school. And that's what I think is the most important thing in learning mathematics. And it's what I would encourage in my classmates and other companions at school.
Thank you very much, Manuela. I don't know if you can start sharing your screen. And we had the last one in 11th grade, but I think that we don't take up more of your time. It is about mathematical thinking and hypothesis validation. It's a very interesting work, but I think that we can stop here. I'm so sorry, we don't want to take up more of your time.
Gracias, Omar. Bueno, pues muchas gracias, Omar, y todos los
Thank you, Omar, and thank you to all the different students for having shared their projects and the results of how they've been learning maths throughout this last year. And with Omar and Mohammed and Rene and the different teachers, well, I think we have progressed greatly, and we've really achieved more active learning and also in critical thinking. And I think this was very much achieved with your proposals as well as teachers. So thank you very much. If you would like to, just as a last word, our international guests are obviously close friends of our school, and we hope to have your participation in future events and in this great adventure that we're undergoing of really creating possible worlds with and for our students, especially after this pandemic. So I send a hug to all of you. Thank you very much for joining us. And thank you to our special international guests. And Sophia, thank you very much for your marvelous work of organizing this colloquium, the set of conferences in 4 different conferences, and coordinating all this. And thank you to all the different attendees that joined us. Dr. Fionegra Laura Gomez,
Bernardo Recaman,
and the Colombian Society of Mathematics, and the different associations that have supported us. The interpreter apologizes, the incoming audio is not so clear. And for all the logistical team for helping us with this broadcasting. Well, I really would love to shake your hands and be able to be at the same space, especially our international guests who have joined us in these events. So thank you very, very much.
Muchas gracias por acompañarnos en el panel.
Thank you very much for joining us in this last conference of the Mathematical Brain. Please don't forget to visit our website.